all. This has been, I think, a pretty incredible journey, right, over the last couple of days. And this is really special to be able to be here in Chicago at the last session that we're having with two native Chicagoans. Really wraps it nicely with all that Chicago has to offer. If you remember in the opening session, where we started was saying the things that we would be covering over these last 2 days, that we were going to be looking at diversity and equity, that would be focused on individual and collaborative engagement, and that we would also be looking at innovation through technology. And I think we've gotten to all those different things and gotten to those stories behind them and ways in which that we can further engage. We also started by talking about purpose, and that in order to really get to that next level, both individuals as well as organizations have to realize why they're in existence, why they do the things that they do. What is that motivational force? What is that North Star that has them make the decisions that they make and take the actions that they take? And so as we start the discussion, I think I'm going to start there.
Okay.
And start, Mike, with kind of what's your purpose? You've been so incredibly successful, huge journey, different places, now at the Obama Foundation, so much more to come from that.
Right.
But kind of what drives you?
Well, it's just, first of all, it's good to be home. It's been a while. I was in D.C. and spent some time in L.A., and I moved back to Chicago a year and a half ago, and I love this city. I got good friends like John who have been a mentor and a guide to us, and so thank you for this. It's great to be back home. I'd say, really what drives me is as I look back, I have seen so many people who have fought for me, created opportunity for me, and given me the chance to see and do incredible things. Mm-hmm. I've been at the White House, dressed up like the Beast at Disneyland. I've seen so much, and I don't think, as I think about, my family, my background, it's not a straight line. And so I think my purpose is to create as much opportunity for others to be able to live their dreams. Mm-hmm. And I think now being with the Obama Foundation, I have a platform to take that in places that I really couldn't have imagined several years ago. And frankly, none of us, I think, could have imagined where we would be, even when the president wandered around and told us that he was thinking about becoming president of the United States. And so I really want to maximize that opportunity. That's my purpose.
That's wonderful. John, what about you?
Well, I think our purpose has been, we were the first African-American-owned money management and mutual fund company in the country's history when we started 34 years ago. And a lot of you know our president, Melody Hobson, who's been with our firm for 27 years and was on the board of Starbucks and was one of the 100 most influential people in the world recently in Time magazine. We've been on a mission to do really two things that fit together. We want to be able to show that a minority-owned firm can deliver excellent performance in our portfolios, but do it with a very diverse team of people leading. Having an African-American female as the president, having an Indian female as the portfolio manager of our international and global team, to show that if you go out and you attract talent from everywhere, from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, it'll actually enhance your performance and allow you to deliver a better product for your customer. Mm-hmm. So we are all about diversity and inclusion at Ariel. We also are trying to make sure that all the companies we invest in, the public companies we invest in, have diverse boards of directors, have diverse management teams, and do business with minority-owned businesses. And so we push all the companies we invest in to really embrace that commitment. Mm-hmm. And we tell people, when we talk to management teams, which is my full-time job, I always tell them, if you're going to be a 1940s company with only white males in every significant position, we're going to think of you as a backward-looking company. We want to invest with 21st century management teams. And so that's our story.
And it's been interesting. Over the past couple of days, it's easier to talk about some topics than others. And it's been easy to talk about things around social innovation, and then you talk about what are some of the things that are holding us back. And we started in the part of the first session was having this, and Mike, I told you, this 12-year-old girl, Marley, for all of you that remember.
Marley.
I know, I keep talking about Marley, who was up here and who started and who wrote her own book, but started an organization, 1,000 Black Girls, because in school, every book that she read was a book that had a white kid with a dog. And so she started a mission to collect books where a young Black woman, young Black child, was somebody who really was the advocate and the heroine and the person who was the main character, not just somebody who was on the side. And now wrote her own book saying Marley can and she can do it. And it makes you reflect of, really, we're still there? Mm-hmm. Like this little girl growing up can't find a book enough that look like her for her to be able to emulate or to say, I want to be that. Why are we still there?
You know, I think that I think there are a couple of issues in play when we talk about why we can't talk about race. Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that comes up for me that I've seen is that, you know, we are and have been at a time of great change, economic turmoil, and stress. And during those times, I think we can think of it as society as a zero-sum game, in which if somebody else is getting something, that automatically means that something's being taken from me. And the president describes it as a choice in some ways between community and tribalism. Mm-hmm. Do we go out and turn to each other, or do we turn inwards and try to tend our own garden? And in that context, talking about race can seem like one of those issues that, you know, well, someone's going to get something that I need to get. And I think when I think about this room and when I think about innovation, I think we all have the opportunity to change that paradigm. One, if we're going to be data-driven, mm-hmm. then we need to deal in reality and with facts. And so we need to be able to talk about reality in order to take us from where we are today to the next place. Secondly, I think that innovators can create the bigger pie, mm-hmm. can create the next opportunity, mm-hmm. and can create the opportunity for people to think about things not as a zero-sum game, but how are we going to together collectively create more opportunity for everyone else. Mm-hmm. The final thing I'd say is that, and I don't think we have an opportunity to talk about this enough, is that, you know, people have wounds and trauma that comes from how they've had to live in life, the slights, the things in their history, the things that their parents and families experience, the experiences that we have every single day. And I don't think we give people the opportunity enough to talk about that, mm-hmm. and create a space where we can be healed from that trauma. And I think talking about it honestly and giving people the opportunity, the way John has done in his firm, to see that through talking about race, through talking about these issues, we can create a better opportunity for each other. I want to have, and the president has always built a team in which, you know, you walk through those gates. When I walked through those gates at the White House, I felt like no matter how I was treated outside those gates, inside those gates, my ideas were going to rise and fall on their merits. Mm-hmm. Inside those gates, I was going to be able to move forward, not based on my background, but based on what I did. And that is what attracts talent. Mm-hmm. That is what creates the opportunity for innovation. And so we have to be able to call things as we see them and talk about them honestly if we're going to have the opportunity to make progress.
Well, I think it's fascinating to know how much further we can go together if we feel that way, but then also how surprising it is in the financial services industry. It's not changed at the speed that I would have thought. You look at boards, and I know we've talked about looking at the choices that people make, and even though they seem common sense, we can't get to that common purpose to do that. Have you seen a lot of changes within the boardroom with people realizing what is the upside with having a diverse workforce, with having people around the table that are not alike?
Well, it's interesting. You talk about the board versus the management in financial services. It's kind of an interesting example I just ran across the other day. I was talking to the CEO of a major bank in this country, and he was very proud of the fact there were 4 diverse board members out of 13 on his board, I think 3 African American. But he admitted in his management team of roughly 17 to 20 people, there were no African Americans, no people of color in his management team. So often, actually, we're over-indexing to the board versus the management. And then in this town, currently, most of the major private equity firms have never had a person of color as a partner, and most of them have had very, very few women, if any, investment partners in the major private equity firms in this town. The biggest investment bank in town has 200 partners. It's one African American out of 200. And this is, again, 2017, 1 out of 200. So we really haven't made the progress we would hope to in this most lucrative part of our economy, where we all know here in this room, so much of the wealth is in private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, and of course what's happening in Silicon Valley and technology. And that happens to be the area where the people of color have been the most locked out and haven't had a chance to fully participate.
And what are the ways that people can continue to innovate to change that? Because I think this is one of those issues, and I think you've even said too, Mike, that it's just too big, right? Like, I'm not gonna, this one is just too big. It's easier to tackle how to get water someplace than it is to track, How do you get people to not feel that way?
Well, I think it's just interesting, I think, that we can all make a difference together. I can tell this is a very diverse group, a progressive group. And I go back to, being here in Chicago, we had a very progressive mayor. Mayor Emanuel's doing a great job. But, when Harold Washington was the mayor, he was doing the same thing that Maynard Jackson was doing as the mayor of Atlanta. He insisted that every company that did business with the city, every professional services firm, whether a law firm or an investment firm or an architecture firm, would have minority and women partners on the relationship with the city. And when those institutions heard that their most important clients demanded diversity, they went out and they found those diverse, talented people. And now, a generation later, so many of the successful minority business leaders got their start during those periods where those progressive mayors were asking those tough questions and being insistent that their big firms had diverse partners on those relationships. So all of us in this room, we're all in leadership roles at our companies. You're all on different boards. You're on nonprofit boards at universities, hospitals, museums. If everyone demands that the teams that come in to do the investment banking, to do the legal work, to do the accounting work, do the advertising work, look like America, all of a sudden you'll start to see much more diversity. And it will become a real virtuous circle of progress.
Well, and the one thing that you said when we were on the phone too, because I mentioned supplier diversity, I was really happy that you had the reaction that you did, because I think that it's easy for professional services firms, and we can say, we can look at our supplier diversity, but that's not the professionals, the same ones that you just mentioned, of who we want to contract with.
Well, yeah, this interesting example we talked about when preparing for this. I guess really an example. When I used to be, years ago, I was the president of the Chicago Park District here in Chicago. And there are 9 museums on parkland: the Art Institute, the Field Museum, the Aquarium, etc. And so we decided to do a fair to make sure the museums were working with minority business in the same way that Harold Washington had insisted and Mayor Daley was insisting. So they came up with a logo for this conference. And the logo was a man in a hard hat with a shovel, and the tagline was "Digging Up Business." So the perspective was, the museums thought, when they thought of minority businesses, they thought of minority businesses as people that were in construction. They weren't going to show a lawyer in front of a judge, practicing law, or doing things that are, again, from a professional standpoint. And I see that all the time when I talk to university presidents about this issue. I said, who's your lawyer? Who's your accountant? Who's managing your endowment? And they'll say, well, no one's ever asked us that question in terms of diversity. And it's all white men. But the last time we built a building, we used a minority contractor. So I said, isn't that kind of a modern day Jim Crow? The black and brown people do the construction, the catering, and the janitorial services, and the white men get to do the private equity, the venture capital, the hedge funds, and the legal work. And you can see that no one's really challenging them on that. But we want to be, again, 21st century economics, where the wealth and jobs are in professional services and technology, not in the older construction manufacturing world.
No, absolutely.
Thank you for that, John. That's a really powerful example and powerful statement. I think when you think about this question of, this is too big, the First Lady talks about this, Mrs. Obama talks about this all the time. There is a notion we have in our culture right now where the problems that we're facing are too daunting for us. And I think at the Obama Foundation, we reject that. It is going to be up to us as individuals to solve the problems of our time. And And I think, you know, sometimes as we talked about it, that old phrase and slogan we had from our campaign, yes, we can. I think sometimes what we heard often that people may have said was, you know, yes, you can. Yes, you can, President Obama. Yes, you can, whoever the leader is, right? We're going to do our part. We're going to vote if we happen to vote, and then we're going to be done. We're going to gripe about it. We're going to complain. We get really worked up. We're going to post something on Facebook, and then we're going to be done with it. Like, if we think about the generations before us, they took a hold of the challenges of their time and individually, collectively, got it done and made change and made progress. No one else is going to do this. It is up to us. President Obama talks about how the most important job in a democracy is the job of citizen. The most important job in the question of diversity, inclusion, innovation, and progress is the job of being an individual of our society. We can't outsource this to anyone else. Nobody else is going to do this. And it's going to be the innovators, and it's going to be the next generation of leaders that are going to be the ones to take this on. And that is actually, when you talk to President Obama, it's what makes him hopeful that we're going to be able to solve these challenges. And
so knowing that and bringing that to it, why do you think, or how do you think the Obama Foundation will be different than other foundations?
Well, for one, I think we have the opportunity to create a 21st century presidential center. You know, for many of the former presidents, the presidency was really the capstone of their public career. And this president just doesn't see it that way. President Obama really is not interested in spending most of his time talking about the past. He's interested in spending most of his time rolling up his sleeves, inspiring. Bennett, I loved your distinction between inspiring and motivating people, really inspiring and giving tools to citizens and leaders in this country and around the world to be able to get engaged in solving problems. And so all of that is going to happen. The other thing that's unique about it is we have the opportunity to create this center in the south side of Chicago, a historic community with richness, with vitality, with the challenges that so many other communities have. So I would challenge everybody who is here today, come back. Come back to Chicago, come to the South Side, and help us with this 21st century project of renewal that the President Obama needs your help with. We're looking forward to it.
One of the things when we were talking to Zeev and others about looking to get the Social Innovation Summit other places than Palo Alto and DC and New York, and really looking, it's saying that there's other places around the country who have innovation and are also willing and ready to tackle these big issues. And I think, you know, in coming in, we had conversations about Chicago brings a lot of amazing things, but it also brings a lot of challenges to it, and having people come in. And I think Chicago's been very open about that and how to deal with those types of issues, and we're trying to figure it out. What do you think we're doing as far as a city and looking at issues around race and inequity, and are we making progress here in Chicago?
I think we're making progress. We've had, you know, a lot of pressure, as you know, and there are some great initiatives going on. Arne Duncan, who is, you know, who did a great job as Secretary of Education, is working with Elaine Powell Jobs on a unique program to get young African American males 18 to 24 career paths and to get them prepared for really high-paying jobs. And it's interesting, he spent his whole life in education, being school superintendent, you know, in the cabinet. His mom ran an after-school tutoring program for over 50 years, and he came to the conclusion that the number one thing is that education is important, but jobs were the most important, and how to make sure that we have those. So he has been leading that extremely well. The president has actually spoken to the young men and helped to inspire them, and I think you were a part of that. So it was a fantastic thing. The other thing I would say, the University of Chicago is probably our leading anchor institution around diversity and inclusion. You know, it was just announced in the paper in the last day or so that the new trauma center is being built there to make sure that the South Side has the right things going on. And Bob Zimmer, the president of the University of Chicago, has led initiatives to make sure that not only we have more minority students and more minority professors, but that minority businesses have an opportunity to work with the university. There are over 60 professional services firms that now work with the University of Chicago that were not working there 8 years ago. And that's providing jobs, it's creating strong local small businesses, and minority businesses will really impact Chicago in a very positive, constructive way, getting to that initiative of jobs being job one.
You know, one of the opportunities that what John just described has created for us is, President Obama wants the Obama Foundation to become a model. And so what we've done is we've taken 17 Chicagoans from across different sectors, corporate and civic, and created an inclusion council. That council is going to advise the foundation on just the kind of things that John talked about, creating an analysis and recommendations for us on our hiring, on our local hiring, on our contracting policies. How are we doing business with diverse groups? Doing a public audit and creating transparency so that we can really be held accountable to the commitments that we make. And so we have the opportunity to really bring together a diverse group of people, walk the talk. And I think what I've found that happens, and sometimes I think people feel daunted by this. I think it's so much easier probably to find a bunch of people who came from where you came from and went to school where you went to school and look like you to come, and it feels really great because everybody agrees and everybody knows the same jokes, and you come to the meeting and it happens very quickly and you move forward. And to folks who work that way, all I can say is, I thought you wanted to innovate. I thought you wanted to do something different. I thought you wanted to create something that hasn't been created before. In order to do that, you need what? You need creative tension. You need people with different backgrounds, criticizing each other's work. You need to embrace that criticism. I saw that in the White House. I actually saw that at Pixar when I worked for the Walt Disney Company. If you can create an environment in which people are allowed to critique and criticize each other, and in which you find diversity then is a strength, you can create something new, you can innovate. And frankly, right now, today, we need that to solve the problems that we have today.
Well, I think that's a perfect takeaway from you, that here we have sitting in this room people who are from corporates, people who are from startup organizations, we have entrepreneurs, we have people from government, we have people from all different sectors, and I think it's what can they take back to do, right? To not just have these conversations and to learn what was here during this 20 minutes, but what can you actually tangibly do? And I think to find that tension within the organization so you can move forward. And John, what would you say is something that they should be challenging themselves when they get back with their peers wherever they're from?
Well, I was going to say, I love the title of this conference, the collective responsibility of our roles as citizens and community leaders. This discussion we're having today, I think it's so important. And I think we all can make a difference. Bobby Kennedy talked about that. President Obama talked about it. Each of us individuals can go back to our home offices and fight for diversity and inclusion and measure the spending by category to make sure you're spending with people of color in every aspect. Ask about, again, the senior management roles of these major corporations, and understand that once you have minority partners and minority leaders in major businesses, they will drive progressive programs throughout those organizations, and they'll make a difference, and they'll create philanthropy in minority communities. They'll hire people of color. So there's a real benefit that comes from asking the tough questions, and it's just not making one more person successful, but those folks will go out and help create all kinds of wonderful projects. And we've seen that with the president, and I think it's something that we can all aspire to be all about.
Well, and I would just say we have a responsibility to leave this room and not forget the things that we heard. And I think it's been such a pleasure to have these two incredible local as well as national senior leaders talk to us about this topic and take it back. Because it's never going to change unless we have the conversation and you have it over and over and over again until we actually can realize change. So thanks to you both.
Thank you.